Hey everyone, this week we will be doing something a little bit new, and we're actually going to be combining some of my previous videos into this video. And what we're going to do is we're going to make another simple Shiny app where you can view some tables based on both BaseballSavant and FanGraphs, as well as some charts. So we're going to do a series out of this, and hopefully you guys get to learn Shiny, plus get to be able to visualize and see stats from different pages from different sites on one singular web page. So we're going to get started by creating a new Shiny app. So what you'll do here is you go to File, New File, and then we'll say Shiny Web App. And it'll bring up a little prompt that'll say, what's your application name? I'll just call this MLB Stats Application. And really up to you if you want to do a single file, multiple file. I know personally in my case, I've done single file. I just like having everything on one script whatsoever, so I can see what I'm working with, and I just add comments where if I need to go fix some code and whatnot, I can go onto there. And then select your directory. So for me, it'll just be the R directory, and you hit create, and automatically there should be code that pops up. So we have our library Shiny, our fluid page, and basically if you saw a previous video where I showed you Shiny before, it's a real basic interface of what this looks like. So what we're going to do here is we're going to just get right into it, and we're going to add the various libraries that we need. So we have Shiny, data tables, of course baseball R, that's a necessary function. And we'll have Tidyverse, XML2, RVest, and then XML capital, and then rcurl. And again, if you don't have any of these packages installed, you just simply run install.packages and then the name of the package. So in this case, all these other ones, the only difference would be baseball R. So if you don't have baseball R installed, which if you've watched any of these videos, you should have it installed. But if you don't, you do DevTools :install _ GitHub, and then in quotes you'll say Bill Petty /baseball R. Thank you to Bill Petty again for creating this awesome package for acquiring baseball data. So those are the two commands you'll need to run if you don't have all of these packages installed. Again, baseball R is the only one where you'll need to use DevTools install GitHub. The other one is just install.packages and then put whatever the name of the package it is in here that you need. So with that being done, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy and paste code that I've written before in previous videos. Now, I will leave a link in the description below, as well as a little notification in the top right corner that'll tell you what video is what. So the first video is scraping those Savant tables. So here we go. Up in the top right, should pop up. And then again, in the top right, it should pop up the other video, which is scraping FanGraphs player tables, right about now. So, that being said, if you have not watched those videos, please do watch those videos. Those contain that code that I will copy and paste in here, so don't feel like you're confused because you haven't seen it before, because it is on those other videos. So I'm going to take all of these lines of code that I have and add it into my Savant page, or I guess our web app if you call it. So again, this is from scraping FanGraphs player tables and scraping StatCast player tables, so you can get a picture and batter, and then same for FanGraphs. So, that being said, one important thing is what we're going to add into this web app first is the Chadwick Baseball Register. You can pull that from Baseball R. And what the Chadwick Baseball Register is, essentially, it contains every player who's played in an MLB game or a minor league game, any pro player really, and has their player ID from FanGraphs, Baseball Reference, BaseballSavant, so on and so forth. So, what we're going to do here is we're going to use this Chadwick to be able to set inputs for our names. So, let me show you how to do that. So, we'll say Chadwick, Baseball R, get Chadwick lookup. And feel free to run this code on your own just to see like what it looks like. But in essence, it just has the player names, their IDs, the year they're born, when they debuted in the MLB, if they debuted in the MLB, so many other columns there. And then so what we'll add here is a dplayer filter. And we'll say is.na key MLB AM. So that's the player ID for the MLB Advanced Media, which we'll use for scraping that BaseballSavant data. And then add another comma and another exclamation point is.na key FanGraphs. So again, same principles apply. It will filter out the data set where players who do not have a FanGraphs ID. And then another thing you can add is to keep the amount of names low, you can say MLB played last greater than or equal to 2020. So anybody who's played in the MLB within the last season, that's in there. Now again, this gets updated, so you could put it as 2021 as well, so you'd have the up-to-date players. And what that allows us to do is allows us to get those select inputs that are necessary for our app. So we're going to get into the app part, and again, I'm just going to keep this very basic so it's in a manner that you all can understand once I get down to the necessary line. So how this works is Shiny will have a user interface and a server logic, and both those logics are part of bringing that Shiny app together, or a mini website, if you will, if that's an easier way to understand it. The user interface allows you to have inputs, tables, plots, etc. The server side is what brings it to life. So, real quick in this case, you have our title panel, which is just the title of the app or the site, whatever you want to call it. And then we have a sidebar layout, sidebar panel, which just basically means there's going to be a panel that shows things on the sidebar, so it's not in the main area of the app. And in this case, it's a slider input where it says min 1 max 50 value equals 30 of bins. And then in the main panel is a plot output in this case. And then once we go down to the server side, it shows you, all right, we're going to render this plot, and we're going to create this plot based on this, based on the inputs that we select in this panel. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to change this slightly, and we're going to say this. We're going to add a few inputs that allows us to select various items. So, in this case, we're going to say select input. And what select input does allows us to select whatever choices that we assign for it. So in terms of select input, the first argument is an ID. And that's the ID that you refer to when you are on the server side. So we'll call this side for right now, and I'll show you in a second. Side, select hitting or pitching. And so what that basically means is, do you want to select pitching stats or hitting stats? Now there's obviously two-way players like Shohei Ohtani. You want to be able to see both, or there's pitchers only and hitters only, and you're not going to get anything for pitching stats. So now we're going to say combine, because this is where the choices come in. So you can say choices, if I can spell choices right, choices equals combine hitting and then comma pitching. And then the next argument is selected, and you can keep it, you can put hitting or pitching, it doesn't really matter. We'll put pitching in this case. So basically when the app pops up, it'll show you hitting, pitching as the choices, but the one that's selected at first is pitching. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is the select player. So I'm going to say select input, and again we will say player as our ID, select player, which is just the output, what you'll see on the screen to make your selection, and then we'll say choices equals unique, and we'll say Chadwick $name. And so what that basically means is it's pulling from that Chadwick data set and selecting those names, which we will have to go back to here shortly because we want to make sure that we have it correct in a manner as such. So we have all that stuff. So let me scroll up to the beginning, and we'll add a little bit more stuff here. So under the dplyr filter, we'll reduce those names. We'll say dplyr mutate name equals paste name first, name last. And then to make it simple on us and to reduce the amount of data that is in the app, we will select the 3 columns that we are looking at most importantly, which is player's name, their MLB Advanced Media ID, and then their FanGraphs ID. So that way when we start the app, it allows us to get those necessary columns and then get those necessary players. So now, when we go back to this, we don't have to have anything selected for this. It will just automatically select the first player. And then to kind of make the code side a little bit lazy in terms of don't run anything until you hit a button, we're going to add a submit button. What the submit button does is it waits for you to submit something in terms of what hitting or pitching side you want, and then what player. So, say submit button, and the output ID, or actually we'll say text equals submit. So, that's our sidebar panel, and we have 2 inputs plus a submit button. Now we'll go to the main panel, remove this plot output, and we'll say we'll have 2 data tables output. So from the DT package, so DT : data table output, one can be Savant, and then comma DT data table output, the other one FanGraphs, or FG in this case. So now we're going to go on the server side of logic and create a server side that allows to filter out the data that we need necessary to select a certain player. So in this case, we're going to create 2 reactive tables. And what reactive tables do is it allows us to filter and refilter data based upon our selection. So when you select, say in this case you select, Jacob deGrom as a pitcher, that data will just filter to Jacob deGrom. So without the reactive environment, you won't be able to select another pitcher in this case. So we'll just call this sav table, which is short for Savant. Set it in a reactive environment, and we'll say Savant _ ID. We'll say Chadwick. So this is where Chadwick comes in. And we'll say piping operator dplyr filter, and we'll say name in input $player. And so that's where the input comes in. So again, we have our input ID as player, and so we're filtering that data set by what player we select. And then from the dplyr package as well, dplyr pull key MLB Advanced Media, MLB AM. So that way we pull that player ID and get that table. So now what we're going to do next is this. Within the reactive environment for the sav table, we're going to say if input $side equals hitting. Again, that select input that we had earlier allows us to do this. So input $side equals hitting. We will say scrape Savant player page batter. Because again, we want the hitting data. And we'll say Savant underscore ID. So that way it pulls that player ID and gets that Savant player page from BaseballSavant. And then else, do the same thing, except we change it to pitcher in this case. So instead of saying scrape Savant player page batter, we'll say scrape Savant player page pitcher. So that allows us to get the reactive environment for the Savant table. So now what I'm going to do next is for the FanGraphs table, match it, but change the code just a bit. So I'm going to literally say FG table, which is short for FanGraphs table. Again, another reactive environment. And this is where I'll just copy this. And this time, replace a few things. So instead of saying Savant ID, I'll say FG ID. And in that case, again, it's the FanGraphs ID. And instead of pulling key MLBAM, we'll say key FanGraphs. So riveting stuff, and then make sure we do change the scrape function. So instead of saying scrape Savant player page batter, we'll say scrape FG table batter. And then same for here, except for pitcher. So scrape FG table pitcher. So now we have the reactive environments. Those reactive environments, when you call them, require a open and closed bracket, or a parenthesis, I should say, to indicate, hey, this is a reactive environment. It'll change as we change the inputs and whatnot. So now we're going to create our outputs. So obviously the ID that we called from the data table output is Savant. We're calling that as our data table. So we'll say DT render data table because we're outputting a table. And we'll say data table. And again, sav table with that parentheses to indicate that reactive environment. We'll say row names equals false. And then within the data tables arguments, we'll say options equals list. And then in parentheses of that list, we'll say DOM, which is just the DOM elements, and T. And T just basically means table. Now there's other elements where you can select a button, a list, the page, the amount of items on the page, etc. So feel free to look more into that. But that's all we need for that. And we'll copy and paste this. And instead of saying output FG in this case, and then same thing, FG table on the same side. So now that we have our basic Shiny app built, let's view it. So hit save, and then I will pull up the Shiny app by hitting run app up here, and then show it to you. On the hitting side, when I pulled up the app, I pulled up Ronald Acuna based on the data set that we have, and we can see his StatCast data up at the top from 2018 to 2021, and his totals, as well as down here we can see his FanGraphs data. So we can see how the two compare and how both FanGraphs and BaseballSavant calculate certain metrics. So you can see like there's a slight difference in WOBA, as well as you can see something like comparing expected slugging to actual slugging and things of that nature, as well as adding more into the factor. But again, the design doesn't look great. We just basically made it just bare bones. We'll add future design elements into the app as we go, but once we, let's do pitching, and let's look up Jacob deGrom in this case. So hit submit. Should be a little bit of waiting time, because again, it is pulling that data straight off the website. Now you have both all of Jacob deGrom's data here, from FIP to XFIP to expected batting average, expected slugging, WOBA, xWOBA con, hard hit percentage, strikeout percentage, and other metrics, ERA, xERA. So feel free to look into that and look more into that as well, and just make sure that when you do compare, make sure the seasons line up, because obviously on some FanGraphs space, like in this case, deGrom, he's going to have a 2014 season on the FanGraphs, but not on StatCast since it only started in 2015. But really simple app, and this is essentially how you just create a simple app. Feel free to hit publish up here, and if I have a bunch of questions about how to publish an app, I'll make a secondary video on that. But hey, now we can do FanGraphs and BaseballSavant data on the same person on the same page. You don't have to go to both pages now. You can be able to scrape that and get that relatively quickly on this really basic app. So that being said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe for future content, and I hope you have a great day.